O'clock, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. I note that everyone is present. We begin with a moment of reflection and respect. I'd like to remember that yesterday is the 33rd year of the Montreal massacre in which 14 women were murdered. But let's have a moment of reflection and respect. Thank you very much. Let's begin with the confirmation of the agenda. Josh, if you will.
That council adopts the agenda for the meeting of December 7th, 2022 as presented.
As you remember from the inaugural meeting, I'm asking for movers and seconders off the floor for every motion. So moved by Councillor Oslak, seconded by Councillor Chapman. And I had an exclamation mark. All right. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Done. The delegation and public meetings, we begin with a motion.
That report Finance 21-22 respecting the 10-year capital budget be received as information, and that council approve the proposed 2023 capital and discretionary project budget and approve in principle the 10-year capital budget and described as presented.
Need a mover and seconder, moved by Deputy Mayor Barber, seconded by Councillor Chapman. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I'd like to turn the floor over to the Director of Financial Services, I believe.
Just a point of order. The presentation.
We're going to call a vote at the end of it, right?
Yeah.
Right. Did we call the vote this time? We did. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Heather. Now, can I, before anybody speaks, let me mention this room hasn't the best acoustics, and I don't have the best hearing, so I would ask everyone to speak in their education voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before Heather starts, I'll probably provide a brief introduction, then pass it off to her. The capital budget was presented in September of this year for the outgoing council, and they approved it in principle. There are some minor changes that are detailed in the report. For the new member of council, the capital budget approval is done before the operational to allow us to issue tenders and RFPs sooner. Following an election year, there's a particularly good opportunity in getting these out the door fast because other councils, new councils might be delaying. This allows us to be at the front of the line when contractors are planning their work for the 2023 construction season, and in theory should lead to more competitive bid outcomes. Although we're seeking approval of the capital, it's also important to highlight that final approval only occurs when the operational is approved. So council has the option to refer any capital items to the operational budget for further discussion, or if you would like staff to provide more information. Staff are hopeful, however, that the whole capital isn't referred, as that impacts our ability to start issuing tenders and RFPs pending council's final decision. Elmer is unique in that we do not fund our entire capital, that we do fund our entire capital out of existing reserves. This is unlike other municipalities where reductions in the levy can occur because of removing specific capital projects. So this is important as a reduction to the levy would still have to be made during the operational budget discussions through reducing the amount of levy funds we collect for our transfer to reserves. So even if you cut a capital project, when we have the operational budget, you still need to go to that operational budget and say, I want to change the amount of transfer to the reserves for that to actually impact the levy. This becomes a bit of a slippery slope with reducing the transfer to reserves. All Ontario municipalities are facing very significant infrastructure deficits in the future, and Ontario regulations require that we have detailed financial plans in place for all assets by the summer of 2024. And with that, I'll ask Heather to take over.
Thank you, Andy. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. It's starting to come back here. Through you, Mr. Mayor, and to members of council, what you have in front of you is the preliminary number, $11.5 million. 9.1 of this is new projects. 2.4 almost is carry forward. So we're not asking you to, approve the carry forward projects, but the new projects, the carry forward projects will adjust as the final invoices come in this year. But overall, they're highlighted in the appendix as being blue. So to summarize, since September 21st meeting, we had a couple asset management placeholders that we removed. We added a Treadwell pumping station. Rob and I met with Aqua. They discovered a couple additional capital items we wanted to include. Discretionary projects also were added for the CIL ECA license for sanitary and storm, which is an MECP obligation, which were $20,000 each. We had a population growth study in there. We've adjusted that number to 50,000, which is a more realistic estimate at this time. 170,000 we put in for the Main Street intersection, which we have applied for the Connecting Links grant 2023 to 2024. And an estimate included for the lack of lighting at 2 dead-end streets, which had been brought forward by this council, identified as campaign issues in the election. So there are other minor adjustments with the carry forward projects, as I mentioned. Those will continue to adjust until we close year end. You'll see them be corrected when we finally approve the tax levy and the operating budget. So council may notice on the reserve graph in the file that you have in front of you that current reserves are very high. Those will normalize to the end of 2025. Basically, we just got to keep in mind that some of that money is obligatory, some of it's restricted, some of it's unrestricted. So just because there's $12 million appearing right now, it doesn't mean that, we're sitting on a pile of cash that we can just expend as we wish. So 4.5 of those reserves are restricted for water and wastewater. These would pay down debt such as the water tower, the optimization of lagoons debt that we're going to have to look at for 2024 to 2026. 2.5 million are obligatory, which are restricted for projects that qualify for OSIF, CCBF development charges. Council also has about 5 million remaining for the capital projects left in the remainder of this presentation. In categories that capital projects that would not fall into these categories basically would have a significant investment that we would have to fund in the next 4 years. We're pushing off Elk Street and those types of things because we don't have the current reserve capacity to be able to make those contributions right now. So basically, a couple questions have come in, why don't we cut contributions to reserves and all this kind of thing? Well, we have a minimum amount that prior council has set up that we have to fund per the reserve policy. So in order for that to be reduced on the levy, we have to make sure we hit those minimum criterias. Other than that, the only other project that's not going to be funded on this out of reserves is the water tower, which we've discussed at length. 3.6 million is coming out of a grant. The rest of it's coming out of debt. Water infrastructure is funded from the user rates, which, again, we have money in the reserves for, which are restricted. The other project that just came up, which Andy will touch on in a further report, is related to the Ball Diamond. We were hoping to get the $150,000 grant. $50,000 of that project was going to be funded out of a parks reserve for the engineering, design, and drawings. That grant was unsuccessful. So with that said, we'll try to answer any questions everybody may have.
Well, thank you, Heather. This is a public meeting. Were there any members of the public that registered to speak?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have Mike Holmes in attendance, who had reached out and wishes to address the council during this public meeting.
So Mike, would you come forward to the podium? Go
Thank
ahead.
you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Councilors. Thanks for taking the time to hear me today. I'm Mike Holmes. I'm the president of Runner Baseball. I've been president for 10 years. With me, I have Christine Spicer. She's the treasurer, and then Albert Lowen is our vice president. The reason I wanted to come today was I did notice the report in the agenda that the Trillium grant was denied. We were unsuccessful, which is too bad. And the way I read this was that $50,000 that was part of the town's contribution was up for discussion, I guess. So I wanted to address that to see if there's anything we can do to keep that money into the budget to do improvements for this coming season. The town did try to do some rehabilitation of Optimus this past season. It was a good intention for sure, but the rehabilitation kind of had the opposite effect on our playing field. It looks good, all the grass is removed from the infield. That was kind of crowned, so all the water runs off, so you don't get pooling of water and stuff, but the surface is very, very soft to play on. So we had a tournament later in the year, a league championship, and all the teams that played on the diamond complained about the surface. It's too soft, unstable. It gets dug up very easily so that when you're halfway through a game, you get all these divots in the playing surface, balls hit it, they kind of go everywhere, right? It's really hard to play on. So we reached out to Marco Clay, who did that initial rehabilitation, and asked them what they could do to kind of help firm up the surface, and they couldn't really come up with a good solution. But they did go down back to Optimus Park and give us a quote, and by chance, it happens to be $54,000, which is close to the amount that's still in the budget as a town's contribution. So what we would like to propose is that $50,000 stays in the budget for next year, and then we can take care of these Optimus Park rehabilitation in the proper way. What it includes is taking out all that which chips and dust is what is in there now, which isn't really ideal to play on. We've used it for years, but it's not ideal. And what they did is added, when they tried to crown the diamond, they had to add more, which that's what makes it really, really soft and unstable. So the rehabilitation would include kind of pulling all that chips and dust out and replacing it with a sand, silt, and clay mixture, which is what we have in Springfield, which Tilsonburg uses, which Ingersoll uses, and a couple other diamond that we travel to. Doesn't include any additional maintenance than already is required now, just a dragging. Sometimes clay, you have to wet it, condition it. This wouldn't be a high maintenance material at all. It would be the same as what we're doing now. So that's what we're hoping to ask for council to consider, is to keep that $50,000 in and use it for this rehabilitation that we have in front of us. Andy has the documents. We've been talking to Andy quite a bit over the past few months about some of the improvements we're looking for. So Andy does have this quote from Marco Clay, if you wanted to take a closer look at things. So I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jones. Any questions from council? Councillor Drozier?
So did you only get one quote then, or
Yeah, for budgetary purposes.
for
we just
budgetary
got one
purposes?
quote, yeah.
So if it was to be approved, would you outsource looking at other providers just to see if it was competitive
The
or
town
not?
probably has more experience dealing with these types of subcontractors than we do, but we knew that this one did the last rehabilitation, so they're kind of well-known in the area for doing that kind of work and have a good reputation, so that's why we reached out to them first.
Okay. Councillor Chapman?
Through you, Your Worship. I'm a little confused on this, and I know we spoke, Mark, so,
Mike?
I'm sorry, your brother, yes. So I'm confused because the company that you asked for the quote from is the same company that did the work in the first place.
Yep.
And they recommended the surface that was put in.
I don't believe that was the case, but I don't know, Andy, if you can speak to it. My understanding was that the town directed the company to go pick up certain material at a place.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, my understanding was, when we looked at it, we were trying to focus solely on the difference between the crowning, between the infield and the outfield, to try to level it off. And we asked for options to try to do it as affordable as possible. So I think it was certainly part of their review was that was a way to fix it. Whether or not, in afterwards, I know before you shared concerns that it would not merge the infield and the outfield. And
Yeah.
we were also talking about other projects like the fundraising for the dugouts.
Yep, for the shelters, yep.
So part of the intention of putting in that larger grant funding was to also look at all aspects of this ball diamond and consider it. Last year was more of trying to keep it functional and operational for the next year until we get this looked at.
Okay, so it was just a temporary fix that you were,
Yeah, I think we were hopeful that it would last longer than 1 year, obviously, but hearing that there's concerns after it was done, it's something for council to consider for sure.
Yeah, Councilor Van Raes?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is unfortunate that we weren't successful for the grant. My understanding is they're looking for something that's more shovel-ready. So my question is there planning that we can do in the meantime to get to the point that we're more shovel-ready so we can reapply for the grant to make some of the improvements? And if the budget that is currently set aside, the 50,000, and we move forward with a quote similar to what you're suggesting, will that solve the issues of the infield, making it safer, and more welcoming for people from outside of the town, teams that are coming in, easier for setup, and will that solve the immediate issue? And hopefully give us time to maybe look and see if planning can be done to reapply for the grant when we are ready, more shovel-ready.
Yeah, like, the quote that we have, we know what we'd be getting, because Springfield has the same stuff. Other centers we go to have the same setup now, right? So it's not a guess. It's, if we get this, we know that we'll have a really good, nice playable diamond. So they're doing other things as well, like Optimus is kind of funny, where one part of the infield is 100 feet and the other part's 80 feet. Like, it's going to fix all that stuff. The transition between the infield and the outfield, there's a little bit of a lip where balls hit and they ramp up into kids' faces or chests, right? That would be eliminated as well. So some of the safety factors we were considering or worried about would be rectified as well. So, and then it's domed as well, right? So the water runs off so that when it rains, we don't have to wait for 3 days for the diamond to dry out to be able to get back on the diamonds again. Which was what the initial rehabilitation was helping, supposed to help, right? And it did, but now it's too soft.
Sorry, if I can just ask one more thing. Do you have a life expectancy of how long this would last? Like, typically, like, if you look at other fields, you said Springfield has it, how long has it been there and how much maintenance?
Would have to ask Mr. Cox in Springfield how long they, or how often they have to build it up or do a, higher degree of maintenance. But I think it would probably, I don't know, Andy, if you have experience with other diamonds in other municipalities?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, usually, I think, I hate to say life cycles kind of generally, but when you usually look at any playground infrastructure or any parks thing, usually you'd say 20 to 25 years is what you're hoping to get out of it with routine maintenance. And to your other point, Councillor, I know there's a lot of people who have more experience with Trillium grants than myself around this table, the mayor himself. But I do know one of the aspects with the grant that we were trying to put forward was the accessibility upgrades, and that was to qualify for the grant. If we're looking at doing renovations and improving something that's existing without accessibility, it's less likely to get grant funding. What they want to see for grant funding is you're changing or introducing something new that expands the utilization. So for works like this, I don't know if we were doing this type of rehabilitation to the diamond, I don't think it would be eligible in of itself, standalone for a grant.
Would we be able to reapply for the same grant with the same kind of idea, the accessibility and looking at the enclosed dugouts? I believe we'd have to create a plan to be more shovel-ready. Would we be able to look at the option of doing that down the road? And then if we are more shovel-ready, like we have a concrete plan as to this is what we could do, maybe there'd be more success in, hopefully, I'm not sure, in applying for that grant.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's a good idea. It's a good notion. I think that is potential. I think the issue with, not to put words in the minor ball association's mouth, but I think what they would probably like to see is this work happen in April.
Yeah.
And, there's that's floodplain down there, so you've got about a month to actually do the work before they want to use it. And if, I know the grant application for Trillium closed, I believe, today for the next funding intake, so there probably wouldn't be another one until the spring or summer. So after this, we'd be looking at 2024.
Yeah. Okay,
And that's really why we're asking for the 50 to stay in, because we're not sure how playable that diamond will be for us next year. So we'd like to get something done in early spring so we can have it ready for May when our teams hit the field.
okay. Deputy Mayor Barber?
Thank you, Your Worship. It's my thought at this particular time that the monies stay in the capital budget for do the work that's needed to be done in 2023, but get the project shovel-ready. So when and if an opportunity comes along to make another application for a grant, and if it happened to be sooner than 2024, we're ready to go. The funds are there and we can proceed.
Yep. All right, I agree with that. I think we can move on, and I think staff understands what needs to be done. Thank you very much for your presentation, and we'll be looking at, I guess, officially at this later on in the evening when we
Yeah.
go to the Parks and Recreation part of the budget. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd like to say just before I go that, yeah, if you could still do the Trillium grant for another time, because we still like the same thing to be done to Steen Park as well, but we'll wait for that because we can still play there, but Optimus is the
Right.
higher priority, so thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you. Was there any correspondence from the public, Josh?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there was not.
All right, thank you. So we're going to move on to to taking a look at the budget in some detail. Of course, it's a large document, so what to do is I'm going to remind councilors that if we have a resolution on the table, and if there is any changes to that resolution, it should come in the form of two things. One is an amendment to that resolution, and amendments would be moved and seconded, and then we would vote on the amendment, and later on, after all the discussion is over at the end of the budget, we would then vote on the resolution as amended, or we can agree on a kind of consensus that certain things need to be changed, which is an easier way to do it than an amendment. And then those items would be added to the resolution when we vote on it at the end of the budget. I would propose that we look at the budget by department. And so I would ask that on the screen, if we could go to, I think it's attachment 1. And attachment 1, I think, begins on page 5. You will find the first item in the budget, which is, I'm trying to find it on a wonderful computer, which is the legislative corporate services, right? So I would ask, is there anything that you would like to highlight in this particular section of the budget?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. So within this budget line for the legislative and corporate services, council will note that there are several lines that are highlighted blue. So those were carry forward projects from the previous year. There's several different reasons why those carry forward projects didn't get done. In some cases, we had sought out pricing that was undesirable. We're hopeful that with some of the supply chain issues that were experienced the last couple of years, that those will be resolved moving forward. That caused us to push some of the works off that we were able to. Additionally, in terms of key projects, I did want to mention, I guess the largest, or a couple of the largest items. One of them is clock tower, clock face upgrades and windows. I'm sure that members of the community and council have noticed that the peak of that roof is not looking, quite as kept up as perhaps it should be. We're still reasonably content with the structural integrity of the roof, but we do know that it's coming to its full life cycle in terms of needing to be repainted, sealed. There's also windows in the upstairs that are needing to be replaced and sealed as well. And I just want to mention, with that work, it'll require sort of a lift truck. It's quite a process, so if anybody's sort of surprised at the pricing, we have sought some quotes on it, and that was what led to us putting $75,000 in the budget. Otherwise, this council will be familiar with the condition assessments that are scheduled for the Public Works, Old Town Hall, and Town Hall. So again, that's sort of our roadmap for preventative maintenance and upkeep of those buildings throughout the coming years. That information will ultimately contribute to future capital budgets and making sure that the recommendations and the forecasting that staff are doing is accurate and sort of supported by expert opinions to that effect. Furthermore, final point, I'll just mention, we've got a project here for roof and HVAC at Town Hall. So this has to do with the roof membrane in the rooftop unit that services the main area of Town Hall. So 46 Town Hall, that is, on the main floor. When we did the 25 Center Street project, we were able to replace one HVAC unit, but this is the only outstanding unit that still requires that maintenance. And again, that $90,000 line item is based on quotes that the chief building official, facilities manager, and I had gotten some informal quotations. And I did just want to remind council that for these projects, staff would be following the procurement policy and, tendering each project or going through the purchasing process for each project in accordance with that relevant purchasing policy. And with that said, I'm happy to answer any questions or expand on anything.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions on this area? Councilor DesRosiers?
Thank you, Your Worship. Can you just confirm again, Josh, what the old town hall upgrades entail?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, and to Councilor DesRosiers. So the Old Town Hall upgrades have to do with a couple of large maintenance projects. So I had an opportunity to look into this a little bit further. Like I said, I'm creating this budget in tandem with our facilities manager. And he had mentioned that one of the items that's due for, in our maintenance schedule, is floor sanding and refinishing. So this is sort of on the stage floor. And then there's also, it's preventative maintenance on the floor, sort of in the audience area. So that's one item. We've also got several interior painting projects that were identified, and the key part on the interior painting project was the Union Jack flag that's on the ceiling. We've identified some cracking, and just with it being a heritage building and requiring experts to come in and be able to be qualified and willing to do that type of maintenance. Again, based on some of the preliminary quotations that we got, we've put $10,000 in the budget. I think the idea would be that within that line item, maintaining the flag on the ceiling, sort of the key feature of that building, so to speak, would be our priority. And then any money that's left in the budget would be put towards the more cosmetic updates relating to the floor, painting on walls, et cetera.
Okay.
Okay.
Am I able to keep going or no?
Go ahead.
So the other question that I had, and I already raised this with Josh and Andy, was the curtains and stage package for $25,000. So Elmer Community Theater released on November 22nd that this was their last production at Old Town Hall. So as far as I've seen, the only remaining acts are musical, does anyone know of any theatrical performers that are going on there, or is it just musical? Nobody knows?
Ready, go ahead.
So my biggest thing was maybe just putting a pause on these expenses until we kind of have a greater understanding of what the future for this theater is. It just seems a little unnecessary right now to put money into the curtains and stage if it's not even being utilized for any theater production.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and to Councilor DesRosiers, certainly follow your logic on that recommendation. We were disappointed to hear that the Elmer Concert Theater is no longer going to be renting that. That's obviously a key user group. I did just want to highlight for council's benefit that the reason that we're recommending replacement of the stage curtains right now has to do with them not passing the fire requirements. So those curtains have very specific requirements. They need to be treated on a regular basis just to ensure that they're not flammable. So I guess I follow the logic. I think that there's a further discussion that needs to be had around operating that building, especially in light of the news that we've received of that key user group. I know that that's forthcoming. It's something that Andy and I have discussed. But if I can make a recommendation, it would be that to take that out of the budget right now would really limit us in accommodating any user groups next year that do want to use the curtains. Again, we're not sure sort of what the best use of that facility is. We're going to be seeking more council input, but for now, what I can definitively tell you is that if we don't replace those curtains, we won't be able to use them at all next year. That work needs to get done before any productions with the curtains can take place. So I guess I'll leave council with that. And just the final note is that, again, there's more information regarding Old Town Hall that will be forthcoming. And, council will, or staff will be seeking more advice from council to that effect.
Okay. Councillor Ozolak?
Mr. Mayor, to Josh, the $75,000 for the clock tower, does that include pointing the brick?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and to Councillor Oslich, yes, again, there are some parts in the brick repointing that are absolutely mandatory, and while we have the lift truck there and people accessing that part of the building, it would make a lot of sense for us to take care of that work at the same time. But what I would say is, we would sort of prioritize different sections of the building in terms of, what's the most necessary. We would take care of those first, and then that would be the type of item that, once the clock face upgrades and the windows are taken care of to avoid any moisture from getting in the building, we would then carry out as much brick repointing as we can with the balance of that budget, just to keep us in good shape for the future, yes.
Deputy Mayor Barber?
Thank you, Worship. Back to the curtains for a second. Would it be prudent to remove the curtains, for now? Assess what the future use of the building would be, and be prepared to proceed if curtains were a component of that usage. And then if there is a suitable user for the facility, you're ready to go. And you can make their tenancy based on the provision of the curtains at an appropriate time.
Right.
But don't replace the curtains if there's nothing going to happen.
Right. So you're asking us to, staff to defer the decision on this until we find some other people.
That would be my suggestion.
And,
What-
Mr. Mayor, through you, Mr. Mayor, I know staff intend to present options to council on potentially going out and issuing a request for interest to operate this facility. If that's what council wanted to do, we would outline the issue with the curtains and that needed to be addressed before services would resume. It's just in the interim, even if we bring that before you in January, there could be a user group that comes forward and says this, and we have to say that that's not a fixture of it because we would have to take them down essentially. But that's something a decision council can obviously make.
So do we have any other comments on deferring the, Councillor Chapman?
I just have a question. It's, if it's a fire hazard, the curtains have been treated previously, so can they not be retreated?
Right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Chapman, yes, we were hoping that would be possible, but it's been confirmed by the vendor that's taken care of it that they're too brittle to treat again. There's some concern that if we have them retreated, they won't be able to handle it this time, yeah.
Councillor Ozolak?
Mr. Mayor, to Josh, how long has these curtains been up?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Oslich, as far as I understand, these curtains, I'm not exactly sure of the exact age of them at this point. I believe that they're over 10 years old, and I know that we've been having them treated on an annual basis. And before that, it was every 5 years, and now we're having to do it annually, as far as I understand, yes.
Yeah, looks like we have a consensus to move this, to defer this item for later. And so we'll add that to the resolution when we come to it. Anything else in this section? Councillor Desrosiers?
I think the only other question I had was regarding the roof on the clock tower. When I had a tour with Josh, one of the things that was mentioned was the painting of it. Is that correct? That's in that 75,000? How long is that painting, like, it's a metal roof, is it going to flake in a couple of years?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and to Councillor DesRosiers, I think it really would depend on the product that the vendor uses. Truthfully, I can't put an exact number on the obviously receives, a significant amount of sunlight, it's exposed to the elements, so I think that there are other creative options that council could consider for a longer-term solution. We've never explored them, so what I anticipate doing, especially given the size and scope of the project, would be getting some different quotes and some different options to put in front of council before proceeding with the work. We've got $75,000 in the budget because that's what we understand, sort of the historic works, the historic approach would would end up costing us. But, you know, in terms of exploring other solutions for something that's gonna last longer term, I think that that's a part of staff's game plan, and when it comes to awarding that project and assessing our options, that council will have a large part in it, in the final say in that.
Thank you, Josh.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Can we move on to the next section attachment, which I think is Parks and Recreation, the Operations Parks. Questions on this section? And Mr.
Thank
Johnson,
you,
go
Your
ahead.
Worship. Just to briefly go through the projects, I'm very pleased to have Minor Balls support project there. It's nice to see them support our ball diamonds. My recommendation to council, having been privy to that discussion, is we probably want to do a little bit more research. I think spending $50,000, we want to meet with maybe all of the user groups to find out if this money is well spent and well directed for all of our users. Can have another user group show up with a very similar comment that we did the wrong thing for them. So my recommendation, with council's blessing, is I'll probably bring back a further report. The other thing is, if we're going to spend, $50,000 on a surface, we want to give it every opportunity to get the full lifespan out of it. So there may be things that warrant that we should do prior to putting down that surface. It might need some drainage. We want to make sure if we do something that the money is spent wisely. So with council's blessing, having heard everything tonight, I'll bring back another report on that one, if that's okay. The next one is the blue one, that's just a carryover from last year. You can see the importance of that even tonight. Having the whole community's involvement on a project, you're not subject to, individual people showing up at the council. You get this master vision for council, and that's well on its way now. And then there's just some minor maintenance type projects with the pool house and the happy to answer any questions council would have.
Okay. Questions, comments on this section? Councilor DeRosier?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think my questions and concerns that I have surround the pool itself, Rob. I mean, I went to the site to check it out. I looked at specifically what the painting was, and just to confirm, it's that grayish building that has the graffiti on it, correct? Is that the only painting you're doing?
Through your worship to Councillor DeRosier, I think they're looking at completing that building. It might be a little bit misidentified here in the line item. That building, touch up on the main building, and there's a few little minor repairs. If you have been to the site, you'll see there's a fence that runs both sides. I think there's also a little piece of fence that should get added there to prevent some of that graffiti that's on there as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I just had some concerns with the overall price tag of $15,000, because from the capital plan budget report, it had a photo of the graffiti on the building, it kind of, and then it said to paint it in continuity with the other building, so I assumed brown and blue with the main building. It just seemed like a lot of money to spend to, touch up some graffiti, so I would like some more clarification on the specifics of that cost. So I think that was a concern I had, and then also the pool exterior lighting for $15,000. Again, in the report, it was needed for and utilized for night swim programs. I just had a little bit of confusion about that, because last year and previous years, the latest swim class they had was 4:15 to 5:15, which obviously in the summertime, it's not even dark until 9 o'clock. And then other than that, I've never seen the lights on the pool myself. Like, when do we typically turn the lights on with the pool?
That I have to confirm with you, Councillor DeRosier. I know the last couple of years with the COVID, the user group that supplies that service for us, the YMCA, has struggled with getting people to fulfill those spots for their program. My understanding is it is their intent to have the nighttime swim use the lights. The other component of that is the lights are somewhat outdated. I think there's energy savings to be had with converting to LED. And to back up to your other concerns there, I expect those two projects would come in under this budget amount as well. And it's certainly wouldn't be our intent just to spend that money. Council would get a further report when we awarded the work to be done. We'd outline it for a contractor, be back to council and say, we managed to get this work done for $3 or $4 or $5 grand. So that number in the budget is kind of like an upset limit and in principle, a number for you, if that satisfies.
Yeah, have you spoken, sorry to go back to the lights, have you spoken to an electrician about this?
Not in depth, no. The lights are going to depend on whether they need some arms or what kind of fixtures that we're going to put up there.
Yeah, just because it was one of the things, I spoke to actually a couple electricians regarding this issue. And again, it comes back to utilization. So if the lights were on continuously and utilized a lot, for sure LED would definitely be the smarter route to go for being more energy efficient. But if you're not utilizing them on a regular basis, you're having them on hours every day. They actually told me that we are better off to go with the current ones that are there, just because even replacing LEDs, like, they make them seem in principle that they're more energy efficient, but you have to replace them more. Parts are harder to get. They're more disposable. So they actually said, unless there's something actually physically wrong with the fixtures that are there now, we would be better off to just maintain those ones, given the current utilization of them. But
Through your worship, I think some of them are out now, and all of the street lights that we have in town are LED. They're fairly robust with a fairly good warranty program, but I would agree some of the less commercial varieties of LEDs certainly don't give you the life expectancy of the ones that we would be.
okay, and I think the only other thing I want to just address with the rest of council is, obviously, being a mother, I've been in that pool. I've utilized that pool with my son in the summertime, and I've spoken to a lot of the YMCA employees. And the conversations that I was having with them last summer was that there was a degree of uncertainty surrounding the future of that facility. Issues such as staffing with lifeguards, pool structure and integrity, and community participation have been issues that were discussed within YMCA. So my biggest thing is, I'm all for, doing upgrades and beautifications of facilities, but if there's no future utilization of it, is it a waste of money? So that's really the only thing. I just don't want to see this money spent and then we not, like, YMCA not be in there next summer or even in a year or so.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I just want to remind councilors that I'm given a lot of leeway for people speaking. Generally, you're allowed to speak once on an item, so try to be brief when you're talking about, or when you're asking questions on this, because we have a lot of items there. So anyone else that wants to comment on what Councilor Rosier was talking about? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Just a sidebar to that question. Rob, if I may, have arrangements been made for an operator for the pool for this next season? Or where are we in the process?
Maybe, Mr. Mayor, maybe I can answer. I believe that we already have the contract continuing with the YMCA, and just so council understands, the way the contract works, it's a very good deal for the municipality, but we don't get any of the revenue derived from the pool. So we pay for the capital for the pool, we pay for the maintenance, and then the usership is divided amongst Malahide and us on the proportional utilization of it. So Malahide pays about 40%, we pay about 60%. And that's one of the challenges too that we council might want us, after you see the recreation master plan, to go back and talk to the YMCA about, because since they're the ones who take all the revenue, we don't get any of the revenue, but they also pay for all the staffing and operational costs, then we can't really drive increases to usership. So I've heard a lot like, oh, well, it should be open on the weekend, it should be open later. I think that's an option, but I think if the town wants to look at those options and expand the utilization of this asset, we need to be able to, we need to go to the YMCA with more money in order to make that happen. So that's one of the challenges, is that this current arrangement is probably the cheapest pool operation you're going to find in all of Ontario. And it's very beneficial from that regards, but if we do decide to optimize this asset, there will be associated costs. And I don't know if Malahide would be willing to share those additional costs proportionately, because they don't put in for any of the capital or maintenance as it is now.
It's a good question for another time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe the contract with the YWCA runs until 2024 as well.
Yeah, I believe so.
Any other comments on this section? Councillor Van Raes?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just want to briefly speak about the ball diamond. If there is a little bit of money in the budget, whether it's something we go with what was recommended by Mr. Holmes, or if there's another report that's available to look at what would be the best use of that money that's available, it's something I would definitely like to see and support if we could make any improvement to it going into the springtime, the summertime, and the ball season, and then hopefully look at maybe reapplying for the grant at a later date.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Anything else in this section? Okay, let's move on to the next section, please. I don't know what that is.
I think many of the counselors will have seen this, and nothing further, I think, in the report, Your Worship.
ECC, this is the next section. Okay, and who's speaking to that?
Yes.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So just so council's aware, the EECC budget has to go before the board. So we present this here just so council can move along with your budget, but we can't ask for council to even really approve the capital until after it goes before the board. So this is just before you as a placeholder at this time.
Okay. Okay, move on to the next section. Which fire services? You're speaking to that, Fire Chief.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. See, the budget is, for our capital side of things, is pretty streamlined. You're going to see some communication systems upgrade. We had our system reviewed, and that was through recommendations that were found. We're all partners in that communications thing, so that's kind of Elmer's share. Bunker gear, every 10 years was life expectancy on bunker gear, approximate cost of $3,000. Keep in mind that 10-year can come to abrupt end at one call if something gets ripped. We have to send it out for repair, it gets retested, and if it fails, we have to replace it. We carried over the cost, we split our payments up for 2022 and 23 on the replacement of Pumper 4, where that was a great move by council at that time, when seeing savings over $100,000 by working swiftly on that move. The rest of it is pretty straightforward, and I'm here to answer any questions that anybody may have for me.
Questions? Yeah, Councillor Oslach?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, to the chief. Pumper number 4, is that new pumper or a used pumper?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor, that is our replacement truck on our number 4, our 25-year-old, 26-year-old truck. That is currently a frontline pumper. So we ordered that last November, and to replace that truck as a frontline truck. I don't know, does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yes.
Councillor Chapman?
Through you, Your Worship. I just have a question about the electric ram. I know that this year you purchased I won't have the right name, I'm sorry, but the electric
Ram.
jaw, right?
Correct, yeah.
So I understand that this is along the same line. Is it absolutely necessary, or is it just for backup?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor. It is a backup to the current system that we have. Our current system would not have the strength of this RAM or the reaching capabilities, meaning the height and the extension that this one would allow. So it would take one accident or one car accident, or we have a lot of industrial in the area, that I would see the use on this piece of equipment. Just don't think car accident. Well, there's other uses for that type of piece of equipment in the industrial setting to possibly lift something or push something apart. So it would be moved into a frontline position as your current equipment is approximately 20 years old.
That was my next question.
Yeah, so in the fire service, we want to have a plan B. we have to have a plan B. So it's always nice to come in with the equipment to do the job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Barber?
Thanks. To the chief, if I may. Chief, you said bunker gear is good for about 10 years, and it's about $2,000 apiece, correct?
About $3,000.
3,000? Okay. And you have approximately 30 members?
We're getting there. We have 26 right now.
Yeah, okay. Just for round numbers. Would it be an idea to estimate that the bunker gear has or the expected cost over the 10 years would be X number of dollars, and then budget for each of those years and put it into reserve so you can buy out of reserves?
That's, through you, your worship, to council, or to the deputy mayor. You will see that there's reoccurring on bunker gear every year. You'll see that there is money in place in the capital for replacement of bunker gear. Thank heavens it doesn't all expire at the same time. We try to stagger the expiration dates so we don't have to buy it all at once. But we do have it in our capital every year to replace how many sets that are due at that time. Where we pull the money from would be a better question to my director of finance.
Do you do the same process with the BA?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments in this section? Seeing none, thank you. Let's move on to the next one. Which is the police department.
Maybe I could,
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for the new members of council, the town doesn't have any actual say in, although we have a close relationship with the police department, their capital and operational budgets aren't really. I know one police chief, when I worked in the city of Hamilton, said, "I'm not going to tell you how much I spend on bullets." And I always kind of refer to that and think of it's funny, but that we don't have the ability to actually change their capital or operational budget. They tell us what it is, and if we don't like the number, we can send it back to them, and they can come back with a lower or higher one, and the process for determining if there is a dispute is to go to arbitration with them. Certainly, we're very happy with the budgets that the police come in with, and they work very closely with our staff, so I'd say our arbitration's very unlikely in Elmer. But either way, we do like to present it so you're aware of what work's going on at the police department.
Have we ever sent the budget back in the last 4 years?
No.
I think so. Okay. Fine, let's move on to the next section then, please. Public Works. Who's speaking to that?
Thank you, Your Worship. It's a fairly extensive list. I would just be happy to answer any questions that council has on that list.
Okay. Any questions? Councillor Chapman?
I just have one on the, where are we here? The street, sorry. The Main Street Lights Optimization, could you explain that? Because I know we just had the lights replaced not that long ago, so what is this for?
That would be, through Your Worship, to Councillor Chapman, that's the boots on the ground construction portion of that project. That's one that we applied for a ministry grant, hoping for 90% funding. I think our application was fairly strong, given we had done the legwork to submit.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? Councillor Oslash?
Yes, Chair, Mayor, Mr. Mayor, to Rob. Number 16, tractor. Explain that.
Through your worship to Councillor Oshlock, you'll notice that's a blue carry forward from this year. That's one of the projects that was on the list for replacement, but I haven't had the opportunity to sit down and go through with staff the role that that piece of equipment plays in both our operations and our park system, to determine the need for the replacement of that vehicle. So it's in there as a placeholder right now, but that's something that I have on my list to do this year, is to review that, figure out if that tractor is in fact the best piece of equipment for our operation, given what we're using it for. So that's a carry forward item, because I haven't gotten a chance to got to it this year with all the stuff we had on the go.
Furthermore, tractor, what's a replacement?
I would know better the replacement of that vehicle when I work through what we're being used for. Right now, we're using it for a loader, a snow blower, a grass cutter. I suspect that a tractor replacement is not necessarily the best piece of equipment to replace. A backhoe, for example, is the most versatile tool in the Public Works arsenal. That may be something that we come forward with a future council report that says, the tractor was due for replacement in your asset management program, but we feel it's maybe better to switch to this type of equipment. Or we might say, you know what, a tractor is the best piece of equipment. But it's used through a number of different departments. They use it for grass cutting at the lagoons. There's a thing. So I want to have a little more time to do that. Also highlights as well too, just because it shows up on a spreadsheet, we do the legwork to make sure that we're getting the right stuff for council. And that's consistent with through all of the capital items that you see on our capital budget.
Is that the same loader that loads the leaves in the dump truck? I've seen that loader.
That one is done with the backhoe, through your worship, that was done with the backhoe and the municipal tractor. The one that articulates, sorry, the trackless. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Remind council that any of these items over $50,000 would eventually have to come back to council for approval, right? So we're basically approving the holding money for tendering and that kind of thing for the future. So we're not spending it right now. We're just approving staff to look at it. Okay, anything else on this area? Councillor Oslash, and speak into the mic a little.
Okay. Thank you. I'll have to move forward.
All right.
To Rob, again, the sidewalk budget, $70,000. Didn't we have a grant for that?
Through your worship, there is a maintenance grant, it's very small, I believe that was bequeathed to the town. I don't know the details on this. This sidewalk budget was an inclusion from the last council. If you recall, we had a petition that came forward for a new sidewalk in town up on
I think Spruce Street.
Spruce Street.
Spruce Street.
At that time, it was reviewed by council that basically our operations budget only has sufficient funds in it to maintain the sidewalk that we have. It's a maintenance budget only. It's not for new capital. At that time, the council directed staff to include an annual amount to deal with the new capital improvements, so new pieces of sidewalk that we need around town. Nothing was done on Spruce Street. The council thought that it would be prudent to have sort of an overall plan and not simply to have everybody that wants one, the loudest voice wins sort of things. So we included in the master Parks and Rec plan, that consultant is looking at also our sidewalk network to say, you guys should probably go here first. It's got the biggest connectivity, not just this piece of sidewalk because it's, you know, a petition or something. So that's what that 70,000 is annually. It's to pick up those pieces around town that needs to be done. The capital improvements, not just to clip a trip hazard. The trip hazards are taken off by your operational budget.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Seeing nothing further, let's move on to the next item. Which includes the water tower. Who's speaking to this one?
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a project that's been on the go. It's a replacement of the existing standpipe with a water tower that's suitable to serve the town for many years to come and anticipates potential growth in the town.
Okay, questions? This is the hugest item on the budget.
Yeah,
I have a question for you. It's a simple one. The one I get when I was campaigning was, what's wrong with the old tower? Why do we need a new one? There's a simple answer to that.
It doesn't have sufficient capacity for the needs of the town.
Any other questions? All right, let's move on to the next one. We must be running out of them soon. Is that everything on the sheet?
I believe so. I think that's it.
Is that it? Okay. So, I've had a chance to look at all of the items dealing with the capital budget, and we have, I'm going to call the question again. We're going to have you read the resolution before us.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. So this was moved by Deputy Mayor Barber and seconded by Councillor Chapman, and I will note that there was a modest addition that was created through consensus at the council table, so I'm just going to read the motion as is here. So it's that report, Finance 21-22, respecting the 10-year capital budget, be received as information, and that council approve the proposed capital and discretionary budget with the following amendment, that the Old Town Hall curtains and stage package replacement project line item in the amount of $25K be deferred to a future budget year, and then further that council approve the proposed approve in principle, rather, the 10-year capital budget and described as presented.
Okay. I will allow one further comment or question if anyone has it from each person. Councillor Oslodge?
yes, Mr. Mayor. To Andy, I think we passed this capital budget tonight, and we can revisit it any time in January, according to the operational budget.
Yes. Short answer is yes. Go
Through
ahead.
you, Mr. Mayor, yes, certainly staff would appreciate some notice, because we won't pull out any of these capital items for further discussion, except for the ball diamond that Rob said we need to do another report on, obviously. But we won't, on our own initiative, pull out any of these items and bring them before you again. So if you do want to discuss any one of these, we'd appreciate kind of notice beforehand, so we could prepare some comments for council to consider it. But yes, until you finally approve the operational, all of this is open for further discussion.
Thank you.
Councillor Chapman?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. It's in regards to the curtains. If we take this item out and we find someone who would like to use the facility and they require the curtains, would there be funds to put the curtains back in? Because that's my concern, is that if we're going to try to utilize the facility and it can't be used to its full potential, are we going to lose a potential new user because of it?
No, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the risk that council would be taking is when you take it out, if a user comes forward, we would bring another report forward saying the circumstances have changed, making council obviously aware of the change in circumstances so that it isn't a reconsideration or anything of that. When new information comes up, you can make different decisions based on that. But in the interim between when they state their interest and we come before council and get council's direction to procure them, then we'd still have to go and procure them after that, right? So you're just talking about, it's not that we can't do it, it's what's that timeline from when they come forward? It could be a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, or a month and a half, and during that period, they wouldn't be able to utilize it essentially. So that's a risk.
Okay. Can I just comment for that? Yes, can I comment on that?
Sure.
Okay, so what I'm asking is the money going to be there so that if we do need to purchase it, it's still there? That's what I'm asking. Is it going to be taken away or will it stay available?
It'll be there.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Van Raes.
My original comment was gonna be about the ball diamond, but I think we're gonna wait for a report, so I'm hoping that once we get that report, there will still be some funds left that we can look at what can be done. But speaking about the curtains, if we approved it, left it in the budget, do we necessarily have to do anything with it until we secure someone? Can we have it there so that way you don't have to come back and ask for approval because it's already been approved and staff could move forward once we find someone who wants to use that space?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at this stage of the year, I mean, we are certainly hopeful that another group will come forward. You know, when we go out to do a request for interest, if that's council's desire, I imagine that will be a process where we want to allow a couple months. So we could very well not get a user interested in this facility until the spring or summer. So I think there's a lot of, I'm not in too much of a rush to do it, although it would be great if after this meeting, Mr. Perry wrote an article and somebody approached us next week saying, well, we want to be in there immediately, but, you know, it doesn't always go like that, so.
Anything else? All right, so I will call the question on the motion. All those in favor of the motion dealing with the capital budget and the 10-year, the 10-year plan in principle? Right, all those in favor? Any opposed? I didn't see any opposed. All carried. Great, thank you very much, ladies. That was a large item. Item 5.2 deals with water and wastewater. We have a motion.
That report, Finance 2222, respecting water and wastewater rates for 2023, be received as information. And further, that council consider approval of the water and wastewater rates for 2023 as set out in the bylaw 3922, as presented within the water and wastewater study, which was completed by Watson Associates Economists Limited in 2021.
We need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Ozlak, seconded by Councillor Rahi. All those in favor? Won't vote, yeah. So who's speaking to this? Heather, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you and to members of council, the wastewater and water rates are simply being restated from the water and wastewater study presented and approved by the prior council in December 2021. This report, you'll see yearly in front of you, basically requiring your approval to update the rates. With your approval, the change becomes effective January 1st. We pulled this to this month so that we have the ability to communicate to Earth the new rates, so they'll come on for January 1st. And that's everything.
Okay. Questions from council? Deputy Mayor Barber?
Thank you, Worship, to Heather. The proposed increases in the following years are slightly ahead of what the projected wholesale cost of water will be. Is that to enhance the reserve capacity of the town system?
Yes, so through you, Mr. Mayor, basically the capacity or the wastewater rates and the water rates were set based on the capital plan and the water financial plan that we had presented in December 2021. There were some assumptions in there for water purchases. However, we do have the new water tower we have to fund through debt, grant, reserves. The principal and interest payments on that will be funded essentially through the rates. There's several upgrades coming with the wastewater and lagoon treatment that we need to do in the next few years. So that is all basically normalized through the base charge and the volume charge that was outlined in the plan for 2021 by Watson.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? All right, all those in favor of the motion, and please. Opposed? None, that is carried. Thank you very much. Item 6 are minutes to approve. Do you have a motion?
That council approves the following minutes. A, inaugural meeting of council held on November the 16th, 2022.
Okay. 6.1, we're doing them separately. All right, any questions, comments on that one? Seeing none, all those, need a mover and a seconder. Thank you very much. I'm getting rusty here. Moved by Deputy Mayor Barber, seconded by Councillor Von Reyes. Thank you. Questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. 6.2, minutes to receive.
That council receives the following minutes. Meeting of Elgin County Council held on October 11th, 2022. Meeting of Elmer Main Street, Elmer Business Improvement Area, held on October 20th, 2022. Meeting of the Town of Elmer Police Services Board, held on October 18th, 2022. Meeting of the Town of Elmer Police Services Board, held on November 8th, 2022. Special meeting of Town of Elmer Council, held on October 5th, 2022. And finally, special meeting of Town of Elmer Council, held on November 2nd, 2022.
Have a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Von Reyes, seconded by Councillor Chapman. Any discussion, question? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Consent agenda. We have resolution.
That items 7.1 to 7.6 of the December 7th, 2022 consent agenda be received as information with the following actions to be taken as noted, and that's that item 7.1 be endorsed, 7.2 be received for information, 7.3 be endorsed, 7.4 be referred to staff for a report, 7.5 be referred to the 2023 operational budget deliberations, and finally that 7.6 be received for information.
Have a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Oslach, seconded by Councillor Rahi. Discussion, questions, comments? Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to speak on item 7.1, and I'm going to read it because there's quite a bit here. First off, I'm very disappointed that the legislation was introduced so quickly during an election period. This did not allow municipalities the opportunity to provide feedback on how it would impact us. The lack of detail in the bill is concerning. There is limited definition offered for affordability. For example, the definition of affordability for home ownership at 80% of market rate is difficult to understand. By this logic, a home that would have sold for $1 million is now considered affordable and exempt from developmental charges if the developer sells it for $800K. The town depends on development charges, like every other municipality, to sustainably grow and maintain our infrastructure. This type of change to municipalities without consultation sets a dangerous standard for the provincial-municipal relationship. Conservation authorities are important agencies in our local government, and they have already had their authority reduced by previous legislation. This most recent change will limit their reviewability even further. Development of more affordable housing is important, but it cannot come at the total expense of environmental consciousness and sustainability. With all that being said, I am happy to see that the modest changes were made before the bill received royal assent last week. I hope that as more information about the specific regulations becomes available, feedback from municipalities and conservation authorities are taken seriously by the province.
Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Barber?
Thank you, Your Worship. Further to Councillor Chapman's comments, which were right on the mark, poor legislation hastily enacted and then rammed through the legislature that'll have significant impact on every municipality on the development charges end. And it's just, it's not going to accomplish what the province wants to accomplish. It'll do nothing for affordability.
Anyone else? All right, you have a resolution before you. All those in favor? As carried. Thank you very much. Item 8.1, the OMER resolution.
That council directs staff to bring forward an amendment to the bylaw 16.05 related to the OMERS plan to include new eligibility requirements for non-full-time NFT employees approved by the OMERS Sponsors Corporation, and further that council endorse the update of the following policy, HR policy number 5.3, pension plan, including the deletion of previous eligibility requirements for non-full-time staff, and an amendment to reflect immediate eligibility upon hire.
Have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor DesRosiers and seconded by Councillor Chapman. Okay, we have someone speaking to background on this, Heather?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I brought Ruth here with me. She's the manager of HR, for those that don't know. Through you and to members of council, the report in front of you is amending the bylaw this evening, and it mentions how this change is effective January 1st, 2023. Currently, our part-time staff are not OMERS eligible unless they meet the certain criteria. This change would allow them to participate in the OMERS program if they would wish. Currently, we have about 7 to 12 on average full-time or part-time staff a year, fluctuate throughout the year. Sometimes we have summer students, sometimes we have part-time police officers or people in parks and recs. So in any given year, approximately between $1,500 and $1,800 per person, this would cost the corporation. Again, their option is to participate or not to participate. But given this change, basically they're able to do that until they become the age of 71 or their employment is terminated. So this is changing the bylaw. It's something we have to do for January 1st. Ruth will administrate the program and send it out to the part-time staff. This doesn't include any volunteer or auxiliary or council positions or honorarium paid positions.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? As carried, thank you. 8.2, resolution.
That report finance 1822 respecting the appointment of an auditor for 2023 be received as information, and further that council direct staff to present a bylaw appointing Scrimger and Company CPA Professional Corporation as municipal auditors for the town of Elmer for the year 2023.
I have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor DesRosiers, seconded by Councillor Uzlach. Question? Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? As carried, thank you. 8.3, tax write-off report, resolution.
That report finance 1922 entitled Tax Write-Off Report 2022 be received for information, and that council acknowledges the changes to the 2022 tax rolls as outlined in the Schedule A as the 2022 tax write-offs approved under the authority of the Municipal Act.
Any background, Heather?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report you have in front of you is a standard report you'll see yearly. We do it before year end, so we would have to wait till the end of the year to make sure we're capturing all the write-offs. Essentially, we had nothing extraordinary, whereas we had in past years where we've had minutes of settlement going back to, 7, 8 years, impact as a reassessment, and sometimes we can have those big hits. We've actually created a tax provision reserve last year because of this. So any provisions we have that we know about, we put in there now. We currently don't have any write-offs that we weren't aware of for this year.
Didn't make it out. Okay, I think I missed getting a mover and a seconder for that particular resolution, so let's ask for that. Deputy Mayor Barbara and Councillor Van Raes as seconder. Okay, questions of Heather? Deputy Mayor Barber?
Thank you, Your Worship. To Heather, could you give council the benefit of your experience and just give us the Coles Notes version of what drives tax write-offs?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor. If, an example is if somebody's house burns down, they can apply for an exemption for that period of time through MPAC, because obviously you're not inhabiting your home while it's burnt to the ground. So basically, you can apply for this assessment. We would write it off through MPAC. We would get this notification to say, this house, you're not taxing for this period of time. Once a new home is built, then it would be taxed again. Another example would be any lease agreements we enter in that are on our property. For farm lease, for example, we would write off in some regard with a bylaw from a resolution from council, because we own the property, for example, and we wouldn't pay our own taxes on the leased land, and we wouldn't pass that on to the leasee. So we would write off that portion per the bylaw. Another example would be Conservation Authority. They had a bylaw from 1996 that they implemented where the Conservation Authority takes care of that part of the land for us. We don't charge taxes on that. That would be another example. We've had commercial properties flipped to residential or multi-residential. Vice versa, a commercial property can be turned into a residential or multi-res if they want. Those things would trigger possibly a tax write-off depending on the classification through MPAC. So the majority of these things are done through MPAC. Some of them are done through bylaw, and they all have to be presented to council every year so that you're aware of what we're writing off.
Thank you. Good explanation. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next item, 8.4, the banking RFP resolution.
That report, Finance 2022, entitled Contract Award, Town of Elmer Banking Services, be received for information, and that the council award the banking services contract to BMO, Bank of Montreal, for a 5-year term with 2 potential 1-year extensions, and further that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the agreement with BMO following terms and conditions provided within their proposal.
Have a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by seconded by Councilor Rohi. Discussion? Questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's carried. 8.5, Town of Elmer contract award, I guess. Yeah. Go ahead.
That report, Operations 1422, entitled Contract Award, Town of Elmer Engineering Consulting Services, be received for information, and that the council award the engineering consulting services contract to GM Blue Plan Engineering Limited of London, Ontario, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the agreement with GM Blue Plan Engineering Limited following the terms and conditions in the RFP documents and engineering consulting services proposal submission.
Mover and a seconder. Moved by Councilor Chapman, seconded by Councilor Van Raes. Questions, comments? Seeing none, carried. 8.6, budget referral, I think.
That report, Clerk 4522, entitled Municipal Grants 2023 Budget Referral, is received for information, and further that council refer the municipal grant correspondence to future budget deliberations for consideration.
Any background anything you want to say on that?
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is a very standard housekeeping report. Each year, in accordance with the town's grants and donations policy, there's a deadline that's set for grants and donations, which is October the 31st. So staff consolidate all the requests for grants and donations into one document, and at that point, we refer them to operational budget deliberations. So I would encourage members of council, we've included the grants and donations policy as an attachment to this report, and I would encourage you to review the requests that have been received to date against the criteria that's set out in that policy.
Okay. Questions, comments, straightforward? All right, all those in favor? It's carried, thank you. 8.7, report on enforcement services.
That report, Clerk 4822, entitled Bylaw Enforcement Services Contract Extension, is received for information, and that council authorizes the extension of the existing bylaw enforcement services contract with Tenant Security Group Incorporated for a period of 1 year, it being noted that the service hours provision within that contract agreement shall be reflective of the 2023 operational budget allocation for protection and enforcement services.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Barber, seconded by Councillor Rahi. Questions, comments? Deputy Mayor Barber?
A quick comment, Your Worship. As we transitioned into this new provider, it's been interesting to see that they've actually been around in the town. You can, they're very visible in their vehicle that they drive, and it's good to see that they're out there.
Anyone else? Seeing none, all those in favor? Is carried. 8.8, Town of Elmer representation.
That report, CAO 5822, entitled Town of Elmer Representation, be received for information, and that the Council of the Town of Elmer request Elgin County Council undertake a review of lower-tier representation on County Council prior to the 2026 municipal election.
Mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Van Ray, seconded by Councillor Oslach. And Andy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, this report is asking the county to begin the review of representation of county council. This type of work is usually done by an external consultant, and it's always a good idea to start such reviews early in the new term of council. Staff are unsure if this review will result in changes prior to the 2026 municipal election. However, we do have realistic expectations that with faster growth rates in Elmer, we should see the town requiring increased representation on county council probably at least by 2030 for that election. I have discussed this with the CAOs in Elgin County, and the county itself is not opposed to undertaking this review. So staff are hopeful that this won't be a contentious item at county council, and that planning for such a review can begin. Anecdotally, we anticipate the province will begin a review of county systems prior to the 2026 election. So we do anticipate representation reviews will be part of what the province requires. So this could just help the county get a jump start on getting this work underway, because those type of reviews are already built into the regional government system. It's just the county system that's been excluded from it. So with that, I'll try to answer any questions council might have.
Any questions? Just for your information, the county council is made up of 7 municipalities, and 2 of them have 2 representatives, the Central Elgin and Malahide, for 9 representatives. And so we're kind of asking for Elmer to get 2 or 3, or we'll start with 2, right? 5. Right. I thank you. Any, Councillor Van Rays?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't looked into this when I saw this on the agenda, but if you could just kind of clarify how much of an impact this can have, getting more representation with county council for Elmer.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So yeah, it's, hopefully it will give us a better voice at the county for Elmer issues. I mean, Elmer is, I hate to say that we're a bit of an outsider, but we're the only pure urban area in all of Elgin County. Everybody else has rural representation, and we have city interests. We don't have rural interest here. And as we grow, there really needs to be a shift in the county's thinking on how growth in Elmer helps all of Elgin County. So we need special considerations at the county table, and part of getting that is to have a larger voice there.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Any other question or comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? 8.9, updated library agreement resolution.
That report, CAO 5922, entitled Updated Library Agreement, be received for information, and that council directs staff to support the agreement in principle pending further discussion upon the negotiation points outlined in the report, CAO 5922.
Have a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Chapman, seconded by Councillor Van Rays. Discussion. Councillor Oslach.
Mr. Mayor, What's the present lease on the library?
I don't know, $12 and something? I don't know.
14, isn't it?
I believe, through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe it was actually $7 with other considerations for maintenance and capital in there.
Do you contemplate any increase?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so this new lease, I was talking to Brian Michelli yesterday, and he said that there was a market study actually done, including Elmer, on lease rates. So this lease rate was based on what they believe is the going rate for property in Elmer for this type of utilization, and it will see us get, I think, $18,000 more in 2023 than what we previously got. Now, that's not to say that we previously couldn't have gotten more if we assigned all our capital and maintenance costs through the previous lease, but it's going to be easier for us to administer.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Barber?
Thank you, Worship. To Andy, that brings us on par with the rest of the municipalities in Elgin County, does it not? We're all on an even playing field now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. So we're all on an even playing field for the library, and we were the one outlier. We were the only ones with a 40-year separate lease. So this brings us into conformity.
Anyone else? Seeing none, all those in favor? It is carried. Okay. Item 810, roads maintenance agreement resolution, please.
That report CAO 6022 entitled Roads Maintenance Agreement be received for information, and that council endorses entering into the new road maintenance agreement with the County of Elgin, and further, that council authorize staff to accept amendments to the proposed road maintenance agreement pending that they are supported by the majority of lower-tier municipalities in the County of Elgin and are minor or non-substantive in nature.
A mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Chapman, seconded by Councillor Van Raes. All right, discussion? No, before that, do we have a background on that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is before council to adopt a new road maintenance agreement with the county. There was very extensive consultant review along with a committee overseeing this process that I sat on for the town. Generally, variations in data and recording at the lower tier level led to more modest changes than were anticipated. Without generalizing, the other lower tiers want the counties to increase payments to them for road maintenance agreements. This would likely have impacts on the overall county rate, which would see our residents paying more for roads outside of our boundaries, because we, again, only have the 4 kilometers roughly of roads. So adopting this agreement primarily as recommended by Stratcorp and the Oversight Agreement Committee is in the best interest of residents of Elmer, because it will keep our county rates lower. So we're generally pleased, even though we're a small player at the table on this.
True, but all roads lead to Elmer, as they say, right? Councillor Oslash.
This concerns on John Street and Talbot Street, correct?
John Street and Talbot, sorry, Rob.
Through your worship, John Street and Elm Street.
Elm Street,
Elm
yes.
and Beach.
Street, yeah.
Any other question? Deputy Mayor?
Not too specifically, thank you, Worship, not too specifically the topic, but the road patrol, the winter patrol that Malahide does, is that by a separate agreement, or how does that one work? If I can ask Rob?
Through your worship, yes, that is through a separate agreement with the Township of Malahide.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. 811, the Optimus Park upgrade resolution.
That report CAO 6122 entitled Optimus Park Baseball Upgrades, Trillium Grant Application be received for information.
Okay. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Councilor Oslash, seconded by Councilor Chapman. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Discussed that at length, so I can just go right through. 812, Use of delegated authority.
That report CAO 6222 entitled Use of Delegated Authority be received for information.
Mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Van Raes, seconded by Councillor Rahi. What's that about, Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this report relates to council's lame duck delegation. So essentially what happens when a certain amount of councilors aren't returning, on August 19th, the clerk declared them lame duck, and it put some restrictions. They couldn't fire or hire staff. They couldn't make decisions over $50,000. They couldn't sell land, and that's to prevent bad decisions by the outgoing council, I guess. There was a couple bad apples in Ontario a while ago, and that's why the rules are in place. So it's some hindrance. So what happens is the council delegates for a brief period authority to me to do those things, and this report outlines the instances where I use that authority. I was reluctant to utilize that authority, as I believe there's a true significance to council's insight and decision-making on matters. If there's a desire to get more details upon any of the items, I would be happy to prepare a future report. We just don't have all the relevant invoices yet. With that, I'll try to answer any questions you might have.
So if we didn't like any of the things you did, we would deny this report?
Just fire me, yeah.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Is there any new business or matters of urgency? No. Reading of bylaws. We have we have to read that. We have a resolution for the reading of bylaws. Go ahead.
That council gives 3 readings to and approves the following bylaws. So we've got bylaw 3822, being a bylaw to amend the bylaw 1605, authorizing participation in OMERS in respect of employees of the town of Elmer. Bylaw 3922, being a bylaw to appoint the municipal auditors. Bylaw 4022, being a bylaw to set water and wastewater rates and charges for the 2023 year within the town of Elmer. Bylaw 4122, being a bylaw to authorize the signing of an agreement between the corporation of the town of Elmer, the Bank of Montreal for banking services. Bylaw 4222, being a bylaw to authorize the signing of an agreement between the corporation of the town of Elmer and Hillside Kennels for the provision of animal control services within the town of Elmer. And finally, bylaw 4322, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at the inaugural council meeting held on November the 16th, 2022.
Have a mover and a seconder for all of those. Moved by Councillor Van Raes, seconded by Councillor Chapman. We have question on any of those? A comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried, thank you. Inquiries by members. Councillor Roselatch.
Yes, Ruby's is having an annual Christmas dinner for those are less fortunate on December the 20th from 1 to 8. And everybody's welcome. There's a free dinner at the Legion. And further, I like to, it's on the front page of the Elmer Express today, Eastlink and is discontinuing and telecom.net, the email address. And as of January the 15th, I believe they extended to May. This affects all of East Elgin County, all the residents who have that email address, and also the businesses. You have to change your letterhead and everything else. I don't agree with this. Eastlink is taking advantage of us. And that's all I have to say about Eastlink. I worked for Eastlink throughout the years, and this is not kosher what they're doing to East Elgin.
Thank you, Councillor Oizelette. That's really not an inquiry, if I remember.
Yeah.
Any inquiry or statement by members? Otherwise? See, okay, thank you. Statements on committee reports, I don't think there are any. Report of the mayor. That's the first one I see. First, I'd like to thank everybody for putting up with with my rusty behavior in this meeting. It's great to get back on, it's tough to get back on the saddle, and I think this was a fiery horse this time, but, so thank you for your patience. Today, this morning, there was a 6-hour county council meeting, and so I want to get used to reporting on county council a little bit, so I just hit some of the highlights of what happened at county council this morning. Talked about, first of all, the warden that was elected last night was Mayor Ed Ketchabaugh of Bayham, and there were a number of items that were dealt with in this 6-hour meeting. One of them was there were 87 housekeeping items that the long-term care homes had to do in order to comply with fixing the Long-Term Care Act. None of those actually, I think, did anything significant in terms of fixing the Long-Term Care Act, but there were. And one other item they dealt with was that the county has 3 paramedic vehicles that were actually provided by the province, which they leased to our paramedic services Medavie, which was kind of interesting. A lot of the time was spent in dealing with the 20 committees that county council has, which is a great number of committees when you consider that the Parliament of Canada has 32 and county council has 20. Anyway, that's kind of my report. We're moving. Next item is notice of motion. Any notices of motion? Thank you. And so we have a motion for moving into closed session.
That council moves into a meeting closed to the public at 8:42 PM to discuss the following matter. We've got 2 items this evening. The first is a report by the Director of Corporate and Legislative Services, Report Clerk 4722, and that is an update regarding an ongoing non-compliance issue. And that item's closed to the public pursuant to Section 239(2)E of the Municipal Act 2001, as amended, as the subject matter pertains to litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. And second, the other item is Chief Administrative Officer Report CAO 6322, and that is respecting a governance review. And that item is closed to the public pursuant to Section 239(2)B and D of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, as the subject matter pertains to personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and to labor relations or employee negotiations.
Thank you. Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Chapman, seconded by Councillor Desrosiers. All those in favor? That is carried. I'm going to recess in a minute at pull rank. I forgot to mention one thing about in the mayor's report, and that is the Legion is cordially inviting everyone here to their New Year's Day levee on January the 1st from 1 to 3. And dress code is in effect, right? So thank you very much, Council.
And we'll be serving real clam chowder and moose milk.
And moose milk.
Yeah.
Right, okay, thank you. So now we'll have a recess before we go into closed session. Oh, did it? I voted on that.
All right.
I think my prediction was off.